Thank you for joining Retention, Attrition, and Mobility of West Virginia Educators webinar. Your host is LaDotta Taylor.
This event is brought to you by REL Appalachia. It is one of 10 regional education labs across the country. These labs are administered by the U.S. Department of Education Institute of Education Science. REL Appalachia represents 4 states: West Virginia, Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee. And we're here to partner with you and help bring the best research information to you for application in schools and classrooms. At REL Appalachia, we do a number of different things. We produce practitioner-friendly research. We hold hands-on workshops and webinars, provide technical assistance, and literature reviews. Areas that we focused on during our contract are things like early warning systems, college and career readiness, effective data use, literacy and numeracy instruction, and classroom technology.
The REL Appalachia is also structured around what we call research alliances. And these research alliances are really just groups of individuals, partnerships that are formed between education stakeholders and REL Appalachia. An alliance may be an individual district. An alliance might be a group of districts within a state or across states, or it could be an entire statewide effort. In those alliances, we could have schools, local education agencies, state agencies, colleges, and universities. And so the work that we do around the different areas that I mentioned as far as research and hands-on workshop, those are all done in alliances so that we build teams of people to bring the best research, data, hands-on workshops to the practitioners in all 4 states. In West Virginia, we are fortunate that we have 2 research alliances. The first is the West Virginia School Leadership Research Alliance. The partners are REL Appalachia, the Department of Education, a number of district superintendents and teachers, and the Board of Education. Through this alliance, we have worked on a number of different topic areas over the last few years, including growth mindset and also the attrition report that we will be sharing today. The second alliance in West Virginia is the West Virginia Workforce Readiness Alliance. Partners are REL Appalachia, the Simulated Workplace Leadership Team, and schools, leaders, coaches, and teachers. In that alliance, we've been looking at culture, collecting data, working on surveys to help advance the simulated workplace programs. So we are very happy to have you today. Today's webinar is focused on the findings from this study for the West Virginia School Leadership Research Alliance. And if you would like to tweet during this event, please use @REL Appalachia. And so with that, I would like to turn it back to Amber, and we will begin the information that we'd like to share with you today on the study.
Thank you, LaDotta. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Chad Lockmiller. Chad Lockmiller is the Assistant Professor of Educational Leadership and Policy Studies at Indiana University, and he was one of the lead researchers on our REL Appalachia report on retention, recruitment, and mobility of West Virginia educators.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Amber. In this study, we focused on research questions. Our research questions were specifically focused on the retention, attrition, and mobility of classroom teachers and administrators throughout the West Virginia public school system. We focused specifically on district-level retention, attrition, and mobility rates, recognizing, of course, that many of the questions that might arise, particularly from the field, might be focused primarily at the school level. What we focused on within this study was variation in rates by district, teacher, and administrator characteristics, and we calculated both annual and overall average attrition rates for beginning teachers as well. To complete this study, we used data from the 2008-2009 academic year through the 2012-2013 academic year. This data was provided by the West Virginia Department of Education through their personnel data reporting system, and we also combined this information with data that we obtained through the National Center for Education Statistics Common Core of Data. Throughout this presentation, if you'd like to post questions at any time, I'm happy to address those questions in the chat box. I should be done a little bit early, and so I'd be happy to take those questions within this first presentation time frame as well. Some of the key findings that we identified, and I encourage you to look at the report for a more in-depth discussion, but the West Virginia education workforce is predominantly a stable workforce, although we found a number of variations with respect to specific factors. These included specific characteristics relating to the teacher and administrator's gender, their experience level, the education level, as well as some district and school characteristics, particularly the socioeconomic composition of the student body who was attending the school district, and then the district locale and size. So one thing that we noted throughout our statewide analysis is that on the whole, about 90% of teachers remained within the same district from one year to the next when we looked at all of the districts in West Virginia. And what we found is that on a yearly basis, about 9% of West Virginia classroom teachers leave the West Virginia school system or public school system. This means that they might go out into another school district in another state system, or they could transfer to a private school. Whatever the case may be, they're actually leaving the public school system, and so they aren't appearing in our data set, and so we would consider them being a leaver from the public school system. In terms of administrators, we found that about 88% stayed in the same district from one year to the next, and about 11% of administrators left the public school system each year. These are average rates, and so they reflect the average over each of the years of data that we included in our study. But they do provide a picture of, one, a workforce that is relatively stable, and also a workforce that indicates that administrators appear to be leaving the system at a slightly higher rate. When we look across the state as a whole, this map gives us some insights into each of the districts in the state for classroom teachers with respect to their retention rates. Now, a retention rate is how many teachers stay within the same district from one year to the next. And so when we look across all of the districts in the West Virginia system, we see that the vast majority of districts, particularly with respect to classroom teachers, are retaining about more than 81% of their teachers from one year to the next. Now, you see some variation across different districts in the state, and you'll note that the highest rate of retention that we observed across really any of the districts was about 97% of the teachers being retained. With respect to administrators, we see a bit more variation, and we noted that there are districts that are retaining as few as 66% of their administrators from one year to the next, as well as districts that are retaining as many as 97% or as much as 97% of their administrators from one year to the next. And so it gives you a sense of both the breadth and depth of the retention story in West Virginia, and it also highlights the fact that compared to classroom teachers, we see more variation in administrator retention. So what do we see when we compare these rates? So between teachers, we see districts retaining between 83 and 94% of their classroom teachers from one year to the next, and we see administrators retaining from 66% to 97% of their administrators from one year to the next. Again, this provides some nice context indicating that for the most part the teacher workforce is relatively stable across the state, but we are seeing quite a bit of turn in terms of the administrators. Now, the literature would suggest that there are a number of factors for that. One, administrators frequently have more years of experience and so may be entering an administrative position and thus retiring out of the public education system in higher numbers. We also know that classroom teachers might have fewer professional opportunities, and so given the way that our analyses were constructed, administrators might be leaving the system as they might be moving into an administrative position in another school district or in a district outside of the West Virginia public education system, or they might be pursuing other professional opportunities that may not be available to classroom teachers. When we look at classroom teachers, we know from the literature that they have fewer opportunities to move, particularly in rural settings, and so oftentimes this contributes to a higher retention rate than we would see in other types of school settings or in other types of school districts. The most important question, I think, that this study tried to calculate was really how many of our beginning teachers, those are classroom teachers with less than 1 year of experience who are new to the public education system in West Virginia, how many of those teachers are actually remaining in the public school system after 1 year of teaching and up to their 4th year of teaching. And what we found is that 20% of teachers left teaching, left the public education teacher workforce in the state of West Virginia after their 1st year of teaching. And we saw that the cumulative rate climbed over those first 4 years, so that by the 4th year of those teachers, we see that 32% of first-year beginning teachers who we tracked over that period of time left the West Virginia public education system. And so this raises some important questions about the types of supports and the types of resources that the state might be marshaling to be able to support those new teachers who are coming into the profession and providing that needed stimuli to the teacher workforce, if you will. It also raises some important questions about what individual school districts and schools may be doing to support their new teachers so that they feel as though the teaching profession is a good fit for them and they feel as though they can be successful as classroom teachers. When we looked at the variations in retention, or excuse me, the variations in attrition by years of experience, what we see is that new administrators tended to move between districts at a rate twice as high as those more experienced administrators. This is about 5.5% annually. We see that administrators with fewer than 4 years of experience and more than 15 years of experience had the highest attrition rates. So what this tells us is that administrators who are roughly newly hired into their administrative roles and those administrators who have been in the administrative position for quite a while, those tend to be the individuals who are leaving the workforce at the highest rates. And this is a trend that we would also see with many classroom teachers as well. And so typically what we see is that classroom teachers with the same type of experience band, those who are younger to the profession or newer to the profession, and those who are older or been more experienced in the profession, tend to be leaving at higher rates. And that certainly seems to be the story here as well. We also see when we look across the West Virginia education system that teachers and administrators with more education, meaning those teachers who have pursued a master's degree or a doctoral degree, tend to be the classroom teachers and administrators who are leaving the public education system at higher rates. Now, we don't have data within our study to be able to explain why these teachers may be leaving or these administrators may be leaving. In fact, we don't know, for example, whether they're leaving because of a retirement or because of a new professional opportunity. But what we see is that, generally speaking, teachers and administrators with more education or training tend to be leaving the public education system, and so they may be recruited out to another school district in another state education system. They might be pursuing another career or another professional opportunity in another field and thus leaving the public education system. Those would all be questions that we would want to follow up on with another study. We also noted that administrators without national board certification status tended to leave the West Virginia public education system at slightly higher rates than those with national board status. And so classroom teachers who had national board certification status tended to leave at about 8% annually, and administrators tended to leave at about 5% annually. And what we see with those without national board certification status is that we see that about 10% of national board certified, or teachers without national board certification status left the system, and about 11% of administrators. Now, there's a large body of research out there which suggests that national board certification status is linked to higher retention outcomes. This is work that's been done particularly out of North Carolina, which is one of the states with the largest national board certification populations. And so this is an interesting point in the study, and one that certainly merits further examination as well. The other thing we noted is that male teachers tended to be, or excuse me, male administrators tended to be leaving the West Virginia public school system at slightly higher rates than female administrators. And it's not clear to us, again, from the data that we have from the West Virginia Department of Education why that may be, but what we do see is that male administrators tend to be leaving at a slightly higher rate. So again, that might be something worth looking into in greater depth. Now, when we look across student income levels, which we measured based on free and reduced price lunch eligibility statuses reported through the Common Core of data, educators in districts with a larger proportion of students eligible for free or reduced price lunch tended to leave at the highest rates. This applied for both classroom teachers and also for school administrators. And so we see that patterns holding across the West Virginia system, and it's also a pattern that we would see in other states as well. The research is very clear that there tends to be a strong correlation between higher rates of attrition and higher free and reduced price lunch counts in both schools and in districts. We also see that annual attrition rates was about the same when you look across the locales. However, administrators, that's particularly true for classroom teachers, however, administrators in rural and town districts left at higher annual rates than those in suburban or city districts. So we see in rural and town areas about 12% of the administrative workforce leaving compared to about 9 and 8% for administrators working in suburban and city areas. This could be for a variety of reasons. We could potentially be seeing this pattern because administrators might be leaving for other professional opportunities in other districts. We might also be seeing higher rates of retirements in rural settings, which typically, based on the literature, have a slightly more experienced or more a slightly older administrative workforce. We also might be seeing the fact that the administrators working in these two areas may be migrating to other areas where they either have better compensation packages or more opportunities for professional advancement than a small rural district or a small town district might be able to provide. So what are the policy implications of this study? I think first and foremost, the study does provide us with a good insight into the West Virginia public education workforce. It gives us some insights about where teachers and administrators were moving to and also where they were leaving from within the several years that we looked at with the data that we had. And it also raises some important questions, I think, around what additional supports and resources can be provided to schools and districts that support improved recruitment and retention practices of both administrators and teachers. In particular, what can the state do, both through policy and also through additional resources, to be able to encourage districts serving higher percentages of low-income students to improve their retention rates or to provide them with resources to be able to do that? And also, what can the state do in partnership with perhaps teacher preparation institutions or other types of system partners? What can the state do to be able to focus in on rural school districts, particularly those in isolated areas, to make those both more desirable working locales, if you will, as well as an opportunity for provide opportunities for professional advancement, improve compensation and benefits, and other things that can certainly help attract and retain teachers and administrators to those areas. The other thing that I would say is that given the fact that about 20% of the classroom teachers who you consider beginning teachers left the state education system after their first year, some attention needs to be paid at the state level and also at the district level to practices that aim to retain beginning teachers, as well as practices that can be specifically used to improve induction supports or mentoring supports, which have both been shown to improve retention rates for beginning teachers. These are all things that can be done, and all of it are certainly implications of the findings that we see in this study. Given these findings, I'd be happy to take any questions. Let me see here. We have one. Given the issues in a rural context, why is the teaching force so much more stable in West Virginia than in other states like South Carolina? It depends, actually. It's very difficult to compare the teaching force from one state to the next, given differences in not only collective bargaining rights, but also in salary provisions, also in terms of the ways that districts support individual educators. What I would say is that, for the most part, what we see in a state like West Virginia is that the vast majority of districts across the state system have very similar kind of characteristics. And we'll actually hear from some outliers with respect to that here in a few moments. But the vast majority of the districts have similar characteristics. The state has a very uniform salary schedule, and all of these kind of contribute to stability in the teacher education workforce. In a state like South Carolina that has fewer of these protections, where there's greater diversity in the districts, where you also have less collective bargaining protections, all of these might contribute to higher rates of attrition and certainly lower rates of retention. Another question. In South Carolina, we also have a surprising lack of movement or more experienced teachers in our most rural districts. What studies or literature do you know of that help explain this trend? There's actually a few studies that have been conducted in Washington State that look specifically at retention and mobility rates in small rural districts. There's also been some interesting work that's come out of kind of the Midwestern states, particularly states like North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa has been studied. All of these districts tend to have very large numbers of rural school districts, and so they would be, I would certainly say, comparable in some cases to what you might be seeing in South Carolina. In terms of specific studies, the study in Washington was written by Anna Elfers and Margaret Plecki of the University of Washington, and then the other two, I'm actually not recalling the authors' names, but if you search for North Dakota retention mobility, you'll find it, as well as Iowa teacher retention mobility. You should find it on Google as well. There's actually not quite as much information about teacher retention mobility in small rural districts. It tends to be more of an urban and suburban focus in the literature, and so that tends to be kind of where the vast majority of the studies are focused on. Are there any other questions that folks have that I can answer at this point? All right. If you'd like any additional information about this study, I encourage you to go out to the Regional Education Lab Appalachia website, which is relappalachia.org. You can find information about this and other REL App studies. You can also download the full report for West Virginia from the IES website, which is listed here, and you can also Google it through the ERIC education search engine, which is available online as well. If there are no further questions, I believe I'll move on to the next presenter.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It's an honor to be with you today. I'm Dr. Michael Martirano, State Superintendent of Schools for the great state of West Virginia. And I appreciate the overview just provided in terms of the actual research and findings. I think one of the critical components is to answer the one question that was just presented from the individual in South Carolina or pertaining to South Carolina, is that it's important to understand that this study was conducted the 2008-2009 school year to the 2012-2013 school year. And I want to talk, I'll lead into some conversations about our recent data of where we are with our retention and then our number of vacancies. But first and foremost, as we move through the slides, I want to acknowledge first and foremost my value as state superintendent is that I view the most single critical component of a child's education as an effective teacher who puts students at the center of their work each day. Right now, West Virginia is in a really positive zone of great results for our students. We've been able to have a major surge in our graduation rate over the last several years, and our graduation rate, our four-year cohort, is 89.81. That is absolutely tremendous with where we are. Secretary King was recently here from the U.S. Department of Education and really heralded our early childhood program as a model for the country in terms of our front-loading of our work, acknowledging the diversity of our state, and a state that has a lot of young people who are defined as low SES, high poverty status in that sense. And then also our second year of administration of our West Virginia General Summit of Assessment, better known as Smarter Balance in our state. We've seen progressive gains in that. So there's a lot of very positive indicators. So as I've distilled and looked at our long-range vision for our state, the acknowledgement is that we have very high-quality programs for the most part. We're always doing our internal audits of the effectiveness. Our superintendents, which you will hear from two of our wonderful superintendents here in the next couple of minutes, talk about the diversity of their counties. We have wonderful programs overall in terms of our delivery model. But what my biggest concern is, after I have completed my 55-county tour, visiting each one of our 55 districts, talked to thousands of our teachers, tens of thousands of our students, visited over 200 of our schools, have found that there is a great challenge regarding the teachers of which we have within our state. And we all acknowledge that no matter how quality our programs are, if we don't have quality teachers delivering our programs every day, our programs are not delivered to the highest level of fidelity. So we put the fact that we must ensure that every child has a high-quality teacher, regardless of the zip code of which he or she resides. And we truly believe that all students deserve a world-class education, and that education truly begins with the compassionate and qualified teachers. Whether you want to use the words from No Child Left Behind, highly qualified, highly certified, we want a highly effective teacher in front of each one of our children. And to date, we have great challenges with our recruitment and our retention issues based upon a variety of factors. So part of our focus during my administration, starting my third year as state superintendent, we have a very clear, solid strategic plan that we define as one, our metrics that matter, but one voice, one focus. And Our priority 8 of our vision plan actually addresses this particular topic in terms of what we define as what gets measured gets done. This is an extremely important topic that we will promote, recruit, and retain a highly effective and diverse workforce, because we acknowledge that 85% of our statewide budget is contributed to the personnel of our state, and we can't compromise our standards. And as you hear our superintendents talk, they will acknowledge that the whole aspect of teacher quality actually starts with the hiring process of who we allow in the door to be our teachers within our state. But when we have to compromise our standards because of lack of availability of teachers, that indirectly has a direct correlation in terms of the instruction that is being provided to our students every day. So as we looked in terms of the earlier presentation of the data, that's why I want to talk about the aspect of when this research study was conducted, and it's been extremely beneficial to help us frame our work in our state, that this study occurred between 2009 and 2013. Here's what I'm going to give you right now. So I want you to see sort of an uptick of where we are with our overall vacancies. So for the 2012-2013 year, we had bona fide 271 vacancies across the board. In the past school year, 2014-2015, we had close to 600 bona fide vacancies, and we're still tabulating that data for this year, and we see that that trend is continuing in an upward fashion based upon a lot of very unique challenges. But if I were to vet that out further for you, and I'll just give you a couple snippets of some detailed information contained within those 593 to 600 vacancies from last year, what we're seeing is trend data emerging where in my long tenure as an educator, I'm well in my 30th year of being an educator, and I've served as principal, as a local superintendent, and as state superintendent, starting my 3rd year now. I have never seen vacancies at the elementary level. Usually in my past as a principal or a superintendent, I would have on average a 1-to-10 ratio. For every vacancy, I would have 10 individuals waiting. We're now showing early childhood vacancies. We're now showing vacancies at the elementary level, which is extremely disconcerting, which talks to me about the availability of young people actually going into the profession. So this data is extremely alarming, and so as a state, I'm using this data to galvanize a discussion with our legislatures who, as stated earlier by Chad, is the fact that we do have a very centralized system in terms of how our teachers are granted raises, et cetera, and a very highly regulated system around some of our personnel laws, et cetera. But the reality is that the issues with our teachers, I think that we have not acknowledged that in terms of the number of vacancies. There's lots of conversation about standards and assessments and accountability and programs and things such as that, but we now need to double back around and have the conversation about what are these 593, 600 vacancies causing in terms of the overall quality of delivery within our schools. And every one of our counties will tell you that no one is exempt in our 55 counties. Everybody is showing bona fide vacancies this year, and we are again tabulating the data for this academic year. Let me continue some of the challenges of which we have, as I've already alluded to some of these. Amidst all the issues of which we have, our current salaries and the rising cost of benefits pose major challenges in attracting and retaining qualified teachers. We can truly say that our teachers, we are currently ranked 46 for the teacher salaries in the United States, with the average salary in West Virginia at $45,000. Now that's the average teacher salary, and that creates me great consternation and concern every day as I personalize this and say I have a son who is a 2nd-year teacher who teaches right outside of Baltimore City in Maryland, and he is a 2nd-year teacher, and his salary is already at $48,000, $49,000. Not to mention other benefits of which are provided for him in terms of acknowledging the competitiveness of which we are all addressing this as a nation. So here we are, 46 in salaries and an average salary of 45, and my son is in another state where he's already at $48,000, $49,000. So you think about in terms of attraction, recruitment, and retention and how that bears out. Also, when the benefit costs and the teacher salaries remain stagnant, teachers' take-home pay is diminished. We've also had, in this past year, issues in terms of increases of our, what is defined in the state of West Virginia as PEIA, which is our insurance. So benefits are going up, cost of our insurance is going up, and our teachers aren't receiving the raise, cost of living is going up, and you have this level that there is a direct correlation that the take-home pay is being directly associated with that. So all of these variables, not to mention others, are working together to create this perfect storm of people not entering the profession, not staying in the profession, and having a very difficult time of recruiting and retaining just based upon the basic levels of economics. Economics is not on our side, and I have nothing to really offer in the recruitment and retention arena that will attract individuals from the outside. However, I do want to say that there is some really positive news within all of that. Thank goodness for the fact that we live in a state that is lots of tight communities, young people, generations upon generations of families being brought up in the same regions where people stay in our state, families, a lot of our family structures, and we have a lot of homegrown teachers. I have never met more teachers that have attended the school, that are teaching in the schools of which they attended as children, and they still continue to live in the same communities. We have more homegrown teachers than I have ever seen in my entire career, and for that we're very thankful and beneficial. We're also taking this down to the high school level, building further teacher academies and Future Teachers of America and a variety of things to increase this level, because we know we're maybe not competitive at the local level in terms of competing with the other states, but we have to place a lot of our emphasis regarding home growing our own and keeping and retaining. But then again, as the two superintendents that are about to talk after me will talk to you about their very unique challenges regarding their geography, where they have individuals who are living in their counties, but then teaching in the other states because they are defined as, in our state, border counties. We're bordered by many states, and people can remain in their home in West Virginia, have a lower cost of living, higher quality of life, and then go right across state lines and receive a higher salary. It's unbelievable how many teachers that we probably have in that arena. So additional challenges, I think I've already talked to you about some of these, and again, it's just supply and demand with us as well. And again, we do have the aspect of what's supported in the earlier research. Many individuals are not seeing themselves long-term in the profession, and again, another interesting little dynamic that's occurred is we have very high teacher absenteeism as well across the state, but because some adjustments have been made to our retirement system where teachers can no longer carry their sick leave and it would ultimately turn into a benefit for them down the road as far as additional years of service or reduction of cost of insurance, our teachers are looking at their personal and sick leave as days off because they're not seeing themselves long-term in the profession, so they're managing their sick and personal days in a very strategic way and using those days in addition to their holidays, which has contributed to our teacher absenteeism rate heavily because they're choosing to leave the profession earlier in their career, unlike many of us on the phone who've made education our lifelong career, and we may have changed jobs within the profession, but we did not leave the overall profession of education. We see more shifts of going to other professions. So with that said, I'm going to transfer this now, the ball to my illustrious colleague in McDowell County, Mr. Nelson Spencer, who will be followed by another illustrious colleague in the great state of West Virginia, Manny Arvon, in the great county of Berkeley. So I'm going to now transfer this on to Nelson Spencer.
Thank you, Dr. Martirano. I'm Nelson Spencer, Superintendent of McDowell County Schools. I'd first like to just give you some demographics and give you some idea and a picture in your mind of what McDowell County has and what we don't have as far as some of the same things that other parts of the country and other parts of the state do have. Our demographics here, we have 3,300 students. We have 11 schools, and I have 280 teaching positions. And I want to emphasize that 280 teaching positions because you're going to hear that throughout everything that I talk about today. The poverty rate in McDowell County is the highest in the state of West Virginia. At one time, I've not looked at the census data in the last census, but at one time, McDowell County was in the top 10 most impoverished counties in the United States. So we're a very rural county and a very high poverty county. Just to give you an idea about the highway system here in McDowell County, there is not one traffic light in the entire county of McDowell. Now, that was not the story 40, 50, 100 years ago. At one time, McDowell County had 125,000 people living in it. And that may sound small to many larger cities, but that was quite a large county for southern West Virginia, 125,000 people. In the last census, we had less than 20,000. So that means over a 40, 50-year period of time, we've lost over 100,000 people in this county alone. So when we lose that type of population, of course, we also lose students in our enrollment. If you look down at the very bottom of this slide, you'll see McDowell. We're the southernmost county in the state of West Virginia. But talking about enrollment, and you're going to hear more from that from Manny in just a moment, Manny Arvon, the superintendent in Berkeley County. He has a quite different scenario than what I have. McDowell County has decreased enrollment, and over the last 10 years, we have lost approximately 600 students. So in that time frame of 10 years, 600 students is quite a few students to lose. We've consolidated schools to try to keep up with the state aid funding formula. We've done well there, but when we lose that many students, that causes many problems within our system. And not only did we lose students, we lost population of ordinary average people, and many of those people were teachers or married to a teacher. So we've lost the teaching force in McDowell County as well. If I may go to the next slide. These numbers don't seem like a whole lot, but when you really start to break them down, it means the world, and it actually affects a lot of things that we're able to provide for students and not able to provide. Since June 2013 until the present, and it was very key what you said, Dr. Martirano, about the study that we were presented with earlier, and I appreciate Chad doing that with us, but the data that I have in just the last 3 years, I've been the superintendent here for 5, but I went back through the last 3, we've hired 137 people. And that doesn't sound like a lot, and we've had 163 to exit. But keep in mind the number of employees that we have that are teachers, and I told you that a moment ago, and to remember that was around 250, 260 teachers. So look at those two numbers there and think, out of 250 teaching positions, we've had 137 new hires in 3 years, 163 exits. So that really doesn't match exactly what Dr. Lockmiller had described, but his is a little bit different. He did his study a little bit different than what I'm talking about here. I'm just talking exits out of the school. I'm not talking exit out of the county. And I think that's much more important because it has a huge effect on the children that go to these schools. Even if a teacher does move from one school to the next or from one county to the next, it may not be counted in the study that he did, but it counts very dramatically in the lives of these kids that need stability. Again, I told you we were the highest poverty county in the state, and you all know the research about children in high poverty need stability in their lives. And unfortunately, we've not been able to provide that to many of our students here in McDowell because of the retention from school to school or from school to county. Many of the people that have exited McDowell County are in our neighboring counties teaching right now. And I really have no problem with that, and we were frustrated in a way that these people were moving from McDowell to a county that's neighboring us, but most of those employees that choose to do that live in the neighboring county. And we have a lot of young employees that come in, they'll teach a year or two, and then a job presents itself in the county that they live, and just economically alone, it's much more reasonable for them to work in a school that's near to their home than it is to travel on a highway that we have no 4-lane system and actually no traffic light in McDowell, and to get some of our schools from one end of the county to the other takes about an hour and a half. So we've done the math for the economics of it, and it's about $7,000 just in travel expenses for gasoline alone to our neighboring counties for them to drive here. So it's very understandable why young students that live in an adjacent county actually move back to that adjacent county when the opportunity presents itself. Going to the next slide. These are the schools in McDowell County, and we actually broke it down and looked at the number of hires in each school. And again, these numbers don't stand out at you until you actually begin to think about the number of faculty members in a school. And if you look at the very first one, Annawald Elementary, you'll think, well, they've only had 4 hires and they've had 8 exits. But Annawald Elementary only has 90 students, and it has 9 teachers in that school. So over a 3-year period, we've lost half of that staff. So you can figure a 50% mobility rate out of that school in that last 3 years. And I can go through each school and do that same thing with you. If you notice the slide as well, you see some reds. And those are our highest where we've had hires and exits. It's no surprise to anyone, I don't think, that the higher rate of attrition that we have for our teachers, the lower achievement in those schools, and that's exactly what the red numbers represent. Southside, K-8, Welch Elementary, and Mount View High School actually scored the lowest and have scored the lowest in the state for several years on any assessment that's been given. In the last assessment, or we can all go back to the SAT-9 that we gave several years ago, these schools have always struggled academically, and I would say that part of that reason is because we don't have a stable workforce in those schools. Just looking at the schools, if you would think of a business or a company could not survive and would not survive with this high transition rate. And our kids are suffering because we have this. The next slides, the next couple of slides, and there's a funny story here. I sent this and I had names on it. I had schools and names and where they went and that type of thing, but the group that's putting this together said, you may not want to do that, you might breach confidentiality, and I agree with them, I don't want to do that, but I did have the names on there because these are people. I know these people. Many of the people that are represented here as being hired or retired or resigned were good quality educators. Some were, some weren't, but the real issue is that these people are leaving and there's no stability whatsoever within McDowell County within the teaching force. So these slides, if you'll just look, you see the schools abbreviated, the position, the certification status, and what happened to them. Were they hired, fired, retired, resigned? And you'll see that in these two slides, and actually the next slide as well. One disturbing thing, and I want to get off track just for a second here, if you look at the certification status, and Dr. Martirano, you alluded to this just a moment ago, and the FC stands for fully certified, and then the permit is they have certification, but it is a permit certified, not necessarily, it could be a quality teacher, but most times these are inexperienced educators in our school classrooms, and you will see a great number of permits in all of our schools. So a lot of times I get the comments made to me, well, Mr. Spencer, you need to recruit, we need to recruit, we need to recruit. We recruit, but the people that we're recruiting do not have full certification many times, and they have a permit, and we're putting them in these classrooms. Now, don't get me wrong, we have some wonderful teachers in our classrooms that have been here for many, many years, but they're the exception. When we have to lower our standards to recruit people that don't even have a fully certified teaching permit, and we tell them that we will get them fully certified, I think we're scraping the bottom of the barrel in many instances. And I don't want to put everyone in that category, but I've said this too, I would not want to be ill and go to a physician that just had a permit to practice medicine. And I think if you apply that to what we're doing to our children here in Southern West Virginia, you'll understand it. We are giving people permits just to be able to teach in our county that really may have never wanted and had a desire and a compassion to be a teacher, but they have a degree but no job in anything, and we'll put them in our classrooms with some type of permit. Some efforts that we've made. Let me go back for just a second, though, on this slide, and a few things that I do want to say. And you alluded to it, I believe, Dr. Martirano, but I'm going to say it loud and plain. We do a lot of wonderful things in the state of West Virginia as far as providing professional development. I've been asked, Mr. Spencer, to improve achievement. We need to improve the culture. We need to focus on the standards. We need to focus on instruction. We need to have better mentors. I agree 100% with all of that. But I would argue to anyone that will listen, you have to have a stable workforce before any professional development is going to be effective, before we're going to be able to focus on the standards. we are transitioning so many teachers in and out of our classrooms, they don't even have the jargon and the vocabulary to understand what we mean by a standards-based curriculum or the new name of our assessment or actually what the culture is within that school. Really, our culture is a culture of transition mostly throughout the entire system here in McDowell, I'm sad to say. Another big issue that you hear over and over, you need to identify the root cause. Here in McDowell, I would again challenge anyone that wanted to have this conversation. I would argue the root cause is the lack of consistency created by retention and mobility issues here in McDowell. Now, we've not given up and we won't give up, and I am delighted to be a part of this just to get the message out. It seems like I've been preaching in the dark for many years about, listen to me, about not having high-quality teachers in the classroom and taking anyone and everyone into our classrooms that we could get a permit for, and then those people don't stay either, so then we have more instability. So I'm very appreciative of being able to talk about this. We have done some things through help from outside agencies and from really anyone we could get to help us, and that's what you see on this slide. We're trying to get teachers to stay in McDowell. That's very difficult to do in a high poverty area. But we are working with Warrior Creek Development. This is a nonprofit. They have built 3 or remodeled 3 homes here in McDowell, made townhouses and apartments out of them, and they specifically designed those for teachers. And this year we finished one of those townhouses in the summer, and we do have some teachers that came from Oklahoma actually that are living in one of those townhouses. There's also a plan that's been in the works for many years, and that's the Renaissance Village that's funded through Reconnect McDowell. They have actually demoed a large building here in the city of Welch, the county seat, and that plan is to build a 3-story apartment that houses not only teachers, but it houses other professionals here in McDowell County. I am the sounding voice for the education system here, but we're not alone in the problem that we face of getting professionals into the county. There's a hospital right next to my office. The hospital suffers with the exact same thing that we have. They have a high turnover rate because of the lack of road systems, the lack of just infrastructure within the county because it is a poor rural county. So this building is not only going to house teachers, but it's going to house any other professional that would like to live there. Something that we actually started this year, it says next year, but we actually started this year, and our new personnel director has put together a program, and we kicked it off this summer. All the new hires that we knew we were going to have at the beginning of the year, we brought them in just as an orientation and a face-to-face, and we spent the day with them, actually talking to them, explaining some of the issues and challenges and some of the rewards that we have here with teaching in McDowell. And we followed that up with monthly and bi-monthly meetings with that group of people, and we continue to add people as we continue to hire people throughout the school year. If there is any questions, I don't see any down here, Margaret. Thank you. I'm going to turn the ball over to Manny now, and Manny, you tell us the issues and challenges you have, but I believe they're the same, but just because of a different reason.
Well, first of all, I would like to thank everyone for inviting me to participate in this webinar. Presentations have been, I don't know if I can be as heartfelt as Nelson Spencer over the challenges that he has been facing in McDowell County, but I would like to share with you, first of all, setting the stage about Berkeley County. When you look at the map, get my first slide up to the far right, you'll see Berkeley County. The uniqueness about Berkeley County, this is my 20th year as superintendent. During that time, during my time as superintendent, we have experienced a 70% growth in student enrollment. Our enrollment is a little over 19,000 students. The community has experienced the same thing, going from a district, Berkeley County as a county had a population around 40,000. Today it's about 115,000. During that same time, as we move forward, and instead of going through each slide, I just want to speak to you briefly, giving you an overview, and we'll cover some of the same materials as I go through the slides. But since 2000, as I started looking at the numbers, we have hired 2,300 teachers since the year 2000. What's most interesting about that, we only have about 1,300 teaching positions in the county. So what I want you to think about is during this same time, we picked up several thousand students. And Nelson, it goes back to what you were saying about consistency and how the private sector would operate and how successful they would be with a workforce that was constantly changing, but also the product is constantly changing with students coming in, students going out in this growth county. I always refer to that as two Ferris wheels going in opposite directions, one with the increase in hiring and replacing teachers along with the increase of students, and thinking about our total message, which our focus is always on student achievement. When we start thinking about Berkeley County, as you can see on this map, is the eastern part of West Virginia. We're only 70 miles from Washington, D.C. The workforce here, we have thousands of citizens that commute to government jobs each and every day. Also, Berkeley County is surrounded by some of the richest counties in the country as far as per capita income. With that said, that presents a great deal of challenges as we try to not only recruit but to retain our educators. I've said many times over the 20 years that I felt like our HR department does an outstanding job and could compete with any Division I football school on the type of recruiting efforts that we put forth each and every year. For example, this year, we went to 12 different recruiting events. I'm lost for words. That's what happens to you sometimes. But 12 recruiting events in 7 different states. This year alone, we had over 200 vacancies, and it was at our chamber breakfast this year, we introduced 164 new teachers that were in attendance. And from that 164 new teachers, they represented 52 different colleges and universities across this country. That's something that's very different than what Spencer just shared with you, because it's about location. McDowell County in southern West Virginia is struggling with location, and I guess we, being in a real estate market, would be very rich in the fact that our location is attractive and we're able to attract through these recruiting efforts, but the problem is retention, which goes back to what Dr. Lockmiller mentioned about first-year teaching and the high number of turnover those first 4 years. And a couple things I want to add to that before I move into the slides is, number one, when you start looking at West Virginia, or if you look at a state that has a declining enrollment and there's having to reduce the workforce, the people who usually are put out of their job positions are those first-year teachers. In our case, we go out and we recruit these great teachers and we bring them in here, and a lot of times they come to us to have a job knowing that in the near future there might be another job that will open up in their home, or that could be in Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, and a lot of times we are unable to retain those types of educators, which causes a lot of people leaving our system early. If we move to the next slide here, when we start looking at growth, and again, I was looking at a 15-year period here. I was looking from 2004 to 2015. You can see there's 14 districts in West Virginia that had growth in student enrollments. During this same time, we implemented a preschool program, which I'm sure that there was a bump in a lot of these numbers because of that. But as you can see, it's very diverse from Berkeley during that time, almost 4,000 students. when you move to the next slide, you'll see the span of our school district from 1990 to 2015. Again, I want to go back to the time that this survey or this study was done, 2008 through 2013. We grew by about 1,000 students during that time, but what was interesting was that was the time of the housing crisis, the financial crisis in this country. And if you're familiar with our location, we are a residential community. Many, as I said, of our residents commute each and every day. So upon the time of the crisis, what also occurred in the school districts around us, Loudoun County, Virginia, one of the fastest growing counties in the country, that some years hire as many as 700 teachers, this financial crisis hit all of those areas in Maryland, Virginia, and this portion of West Virginia as far as the housing market was concerned. And a strange thing happened. Their hiring of school teachers slowed down during those times, which made it great for us on the ability to retain more teachers during that time period. But as the economy improved and things got healthier financially, nationally, we started seeing the same reoccurrence of the 200 vacancies each and every year here in our district. One of the things that when we start talking about teacher vacancies, I don't think we can talk about that unless we talk about special needs. As you look at our this exceptionality chart of students, special needs students in Berkeley County, you can see in 1997 we had 1,665 students with special needs, and in 2015 we have 3,237. When you start looking at the enrollments between 1997 and 2015 at the district level, we picked up 35% in total student growth, but our special needs population grew by 49%. The reason that I want to bring this up, if you look down the chart to autism, AU, there's an asterisk, you'll see that there's 232 students in our district in 2015 being served in an autism classroom. If you go up to other health impaired, OH, which is 4 columns up, you'll see a number of 277. The reason I'm mentioning this, a lot of those students and other health impaired are also being served in autism. When you add those numbers together, that particular year, we were serving almost 350 students in our autistic classrooms, or in our autism classrooms. The reason I bring that up is the fact that when we start looking at recruiting and retaining, there's even a greater issue when we start looking for certification, not only in our hard-to-find core subject areas, but these special needs areas, these critical special needs areas that require special training and assistance to deal with this, the needs of our students. When you start breaking those numbers down, you'll see very quickly, for instance, last year, Berkeley County spent $33.5 million on our special needs programs, and the reason is the severity of our children that we are receiving and the specialized care that is required. Being able to be competitive in the recruiting of certified teachers is imperative to the success not only of the students in this class, but also all students in the system as we try to have those dollars available to recruit all teachers. The point being, when you look at a special needs class that is what we consider low incidence, sometimes you might have 350 students, but you might be serving that population with 100 adults, including certified teachers and special aides for those classrooms. In 2010, I did a presentation at the State Board in Charleston. At the time, we had 32 autism classrooms in the state of West Virginia. And out of the 32 classrooms, we only had 17 certified teachers. So as we started looking for certification and talking about the importance of the critical needs areas, one of the most expensive and critical areas that we need to provide quality education is our special needs classrooms. And I think that's as we start looking at retention, this is something that we need to spend as much time on as the complete study as we're looking at retention recruitment of teachers. When you look at Berkeley County 2008 through 2016, one of the things that when we were looking at the number of vacancies, you can see if you look at the professional vacancies across the top, the number of retirements and a number of resignations. And just for reference, in 2015-2016, you can see that we had a total of 127 of those combined. And then when you take into consideration the growth of the school district, for informational purposes, since 2013, we opened 4 new schools, one being a new AAA high school that opened with about 1,300 students. So during the time where we're recruiting and retaining and teachers to fill the vacancies of the resignations and retirements, we're also opening schools because of the growth, which sounds like a nice problem to have, but when you're out trying to recruit your science and math and foreign language teachers and you're unable to do so because of the competitive salaries in the areas around you, the challenges are very real. As Spencer said earlier, we have similar situations, but they're vastly different with what we're dealing with. This just shows the approximately 2,300 professional positions filled since 2000. Annual professional staffings, as I spoke with you, brought up the 200 professional vacancies every year. Permanent subs usually fill in for the unfilled areas. This year, for instance, we had over 30 of those placements. Some years, back 8 to 10 years ago, it wasn't unusual for us to have 75 to 80 permanent subs when we would open schools for the first day of our students. In 2016, we had 30 permanent substitutes. The areas, though, that concern us is special education, as I mentioned earlier. Science, English as a second language, and Spanish, and it's always math. We can talk about that all day. Another area that's important to us here in Berkeley County is diversity. It's important. We're the most diverse county in the state of West Virginia. Our high schools, we have 27 different languages in our school district, but most important to that is that we have a large Hispanic population. We have a large African-American population, and it's important to be able to recruit the minority teachers. We've had programs in place for many, many years, programs such as Growing Your Own Teachers, and we've taken that a step further. Instead of just looking at minority teachers, we're trying to grow our own teacher period in high schools with Future Teachers of America and programs such as that to encourage young, bright students to think about selecting the field of education as their career. One of the other things, as we hit the recruiting trail and we're out there, we also notice the lack of numbers that are coming to sessions. And you can see just here the number of program providers in West Virginia is 23 colleges and universities. The enrollment into teacher education programs was 3,551, and the completers was just 1,192. The 3-year trend, as you can see, was only around 26%. The recruiting and retaining challenges, most important to us, and as Dr. Martirano mentioned earlier, and being an educator from Maryland, and one of our greatest challenges, as you will see here on a slide coming up, is the salaries of these surrounding school districts around Berkeley County, but incentive pay, the ability for us to be able to compete. I know that in Maryland they have a geographic index that they take into consideration for the cost of living. In Virginia, they have a program that's called a competitive salary index that is not for all counties, but just for those select counties that are having difficulty in hiring their teachers and retaining their teachers. Quality professionals, special education, math, science, foreign language, speech-language pathologists. The competitive salaries and benefits that were mentioned earlier is absolutely critical because one of the things that we've been able to hang our hat on up here is the fact that our benefit package, what we consider very competitive to other districts around us, but most recently with the concerns with PEIA and the coverage that's provided to employees, it does cause us great concerns that it's taking an incentive away from us that might make a difference on our ability to recruit. Another issue that I'm concerned about is something most recently, looking at tuition reimbursement being removed because it's so important that districts around us offer tuition for master degrees, and it's that's a deal breaker a lot of times where a person coming to our state, and we can say we have this great community, it's safe, it's a beautiful place to live, come here and teach for us, but by the way, you're going to have to pay your own tuition for degree advancement, whereas our competition is paying that. One of the other things, that the reality check here is that our school district acts as a recruitment source for Virginia and Maryland border counties. The thing that's most disheartening is the loss of investment that we put towards turning those new teachers into great teachers, and we're securing that investment through a lot of quality staff development only to be outbid by a nearby county where a person can still live in Berkeley and travel to several counties and make thousands of dollars more, which actually, when you look at all of this and we come to the end of the day, it always comes down to money and the ability to be competitive in the fact of not only benefits but also teachers being able to afford to live in a community and not have to travel outside the community to hire or to earn a higher wage in order to meet the lifestyle that they want to provide for their family. When we look at Maryland versus Berkeley County, and Dr. Martirano was from Allegheny County, and you can see this. This is average salaries for these counties. When you look at Berkeley County, West Virginia, there's a couple of incentives that does not appear in that bar, and one is we do a cost of living, which is $1,000, and we also have an incentive package for attendance, which is another $1,500. But even with that included, you can see I guess most important to me is Washington County, which is the first blue bar to the left, which is 10 minutes from us, and you can see the difference in salaries. The same can be said, but not as evident when you look at the Virginia counties. The Virginia counties, those numbers are, while not as, the span isn't as great, but they're still much higher than what we have in Berkeley County. I guess in ending this conversation. Hello?
Yeah, we can still hear you.
Okay. I guess in ending this conversation, there was just so much to say, and I've been, over the many years of presenting at the state level, it was trying to put this package together, and as I'm talking to you, it's always been in our state one size fits all. And when I would look at the data, and we continually get high marks for the school aid formula, and I think when you look at the equitable side of that, it's good, but when you start looking at the reality of the ability to retain and recruit quality educators in our state, there has to be more thought put into that process that makes us competitive to the locations in which we live. And with that said, the same with Mercer or McDowell County and Mercer County down in the southern tips, those same types of solutions have to be offered to attract teachers in all areas of West Virginia. And I hope that our conversation will make a difference and enlighten some of the folks as the decision makers who might have an opportunity to make a difference in our ability to retain quality educators. Thank you.
Alrighty, and thank you, Mr. Arvin, for your perspective on Berkeley County schools. And there's just a quick comparison to the Virginia schools there as well. So at this time, we'd like to open the floor to participants and attendees. If you have any questions, please type them in our Q&A box at this time, and we'll get those over to the presenters for you.
This is Dr. Martirano. May I say something else? Can you still hear me?
Yeah, absolutely.
I appreciate the wonderful overview from our two superintendents who just do a fine job for us every day and continue to provide high-quality education for our students based upon their unique challenges and as they provide opportunities in that for our students. The other thing I want to delve into just real quickly is both superintendents talked about their challenges within special education. I think this is a very interesting piece of information I want to share at the end, is that of the vacancies that we currently have in West Virginia, many of those, several hundred of those, are associated with special education, and that's a national trend. But I did something very interesting, and if there's other individuals on this from other states, I'd like to hear your perspective. We have close to 19,000 teachers overall, and I brought my certification department in the last year, and I asked them to go through all of our certifications of our general educators to determine how many individuals had special education endorsement. We have over 2,900 teachers in our West Virginia classrooms as general educators who are special education endorsed, who choose not to use that because of the additional demands. I could take care of our special education problem overnight in terms of our vacancies by incentivizing and teasing out some of our own teachers from their general education positions and being able to fill those with maybe not so critical need areas. But we don't have any vehicle that will allow us to do that. But I found that to be very illuminating data, that in our general education population, I have close to 3,000 teachers that are special education certified. And those are my last comments.
Thank you, Dr. Martirano. We do have a question from Margaret Pennington. How do we address our growing teaching shortage problems with less and less funding available to us in non-competitive salaries?
I'll take a stab at it. This is Dr. Martirano. I think that we are at a critical tipping point right now. If I were to go into recruiting fairs with 50 of these states across America, people may come to the table of West Virginia because of a variety of factors, but once they start looking at the issues of our benefits and things such as that, they're very savvy, as both Superintendent Arvon as well as our superintendent from McDowell County have mentioned as well. They're looking at those benefits, the salaries, the tuition reimbursements, et cetera. But aside from that, I've had to put great emphasis on the fact of what I talked about within my allotted time of home growing our own, encouraging our young people to go into the teaching profession. I think sometimes we do a disservice to our profession because as educators, we encourage our young people to go into every profession except teaching. And I think we need to do a better job of that at our graduations and honor our valedictorians who are our teachers and encourage students to do that. Have Future Teachers of America, make certain that we are acknowledging this as a pathway in our career development centers and putting our emphasis on our young people within our communities who are looking for a very stable sense of employment in the area where they can provide need. I think there's also some misnomer out there that young people think because they get a college education that they're going to go on and make six figures automatically. There are very few professions that allow that to occur. And granted, our salaries are lower, but when we look at the quality of life and we look at, you know, the issues in terms of family and their starting salaries, it is competitive within the socioeconomic ranks of the state of West Virginia. But one of my pieces that causes me great chagrin is the fact that we don't promote the teaching profession at a high level of once it was presented as a noble profession, and that young people should see themselves in the future being a part of the profession. The other disadvantages were sometimes a disadvantage of all the progress of which we've made. There's so many other wonderful opportunities for children, but we are seeing a national trend, not just in West Virginia, but a national trend in terms of teacher shortage. And we were looking at trying to create a teacher corps, trying to provide some incentivization. So we have a plan here in terms of how we focus on it, except that there's also there is that proverbial dollar associated with it. So I'll let others chime in.
Okay. If there's no other responses and doesn't look like we have any other questions, so at this time I would just like to thank the panelists. Thank you to Dr. Lockmiller for presenting the research, and thank you to the two district superintendents, Manny Arvin and Nelson Spencer, for your respective perspectives on the teacher shortage and how you're working to alleviate that. And then thank you again to Dr. Martirano and the State Superintendent's Office for participating. And when participants exit, they'll receive a link to a stakeholder feedback survey. This just guides REL Appalachia's future progress and the ability to tailor our research and our offerings to the needs of the communities that we work in. So with that, I would like to thank you all for attending the Recruitment, Attrition, and Mobility of West Virginia Educators webinar, and we look forward to sending you the link for your access after the end of this, after it's approved by the U.S. Department of Education. So thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.